So what happened is that my family was having me see a psychiatrist at the courthouse for some reason, since I was having breakdowns and memory bleed-throughs at home. And they acted so innocent, like, oh, it's all you, and we'll just help you. And it was always putting everything and all the blame on you type of situation, and deflecting constantly. So the psychiatrist was helping me find places on a map. And when I told him about a cartoon-like place, but I couldn't remember the name of it, of Dogpatch USA, Arkansas, he located it for me on a computer. And many places I've documented go to different sources and the information I send out. But now they're revitalizing Dogpatch USA, the people who have the funds and the money to do it. And they're gonna have millions put into it for like this rebirth, which they do with some of these places. And hopefully it'll be a beautification process of the nightmares that once originated from there and were played out there. Because some places can have success with this, and who's facilitating it and funding it and so on, if the spiritual and the physical cleansing can neutralize and sanctify that land. But other places, they just need to be straight up burned and destroyed. So anyways, I was gonna motion and file all the paperwork, have my name changed. I had all these forms filled out, and I was sitting on a bench at the courthouse the day I turned 18, and then my mother comes down, intercepts me, and talked to me very sweetly and manipulatively, trying to coerce me to stop what I was doing. So then my father and my brother come in, take me by my arms, took me outside, where later we were all put into a black car that night after fighting in a driveway at our house, and we were all mind wiped and reset. And I was sitting between two men that had the tech put to my forehead in what they call the Heinz 57, that makes it feel like your brain is bleeding on the inside. And at that point I lost my entire life and history, and also other people's histories, because of my elasticity and retention abilities and compartmentalization factors that I had retained. So I later went back to a spot called Carson Park, and that place had a cop and my grandfather that would take turns filming me being drowned in a pool. There was a small pond there that was by some cliffs. It wasn't a pool, it was a pond. So they also held me off of these cliffs, and then the cop would roll up his sleeves and the film would just get really close to my face, recording these events and multiple drownings. So I just saw this large ring on his finger, a tattoo, and sometimes he had on a white shirt. And this was also scatter patterned into me, John and Caspel's file of Minority Report originating in the Psi bases of Idaho. Then my father would later take me to the spot and re-trigger the emotional locks and feed the ducks at this exact location and pond. So his job was always to take me back to the places that I had been traumatized to reinstill that. So this initial trauma was also linked to Westbury Mansion in Long Island, where I was also drowned in these ponds in the gardens randomly before being taken back home, and then in various other places. So when it didn't work anymore, I think I stood up, got out of the pond, and scared this cop and my handler grandfather when I stood my ground. And I don't remember exactly what happened to this cop that day, but I'm pretty sure he had a brain hemorrhage because he had some dark fluid that was coming out of his nose, and then I never saw him again. So they later ended up filling this body of water to no longer echo with a big huge pile of rocks, and that kind of solidified the cover-up of the events there for a while at least. And when they filmed things, sometimes it was put on the dark web or it was broadcast to other children in our team to have them experience the same time fractures, or to confuse them and shuffle memories. So some other places to mention are Montanay, where there was a group of people a long time ago that wanted to overthrow the Federal Reserve System and make their own money. And speeches were held out on the water on these stone platforms, and hotels became a resort with gondolas and all these beautiful things, and it became a little eclectic club. So it gained national momentum, and then there was a secret war brought there, and the community was destroyed, some imprisoned and scattered, and the National Guard had to come and restructure the whole lake and the banks and everything there and flood the city. So the border of Arkansas and Missouri has had many prophetic prophecies talked about there, some which have not been fulfilled yet. But what happened on that border was also time openings, with secret soldiers sent in what we called human extinction protocols. And that was ensuring that the ancient beasts didn't wipe out the entire human species as they would have done in their growing ranks in different episodic periods. So starting with the dinosaurs, and then in the Ozarks regions there was bear lions, evil birds, terror birds, these giant birds, short-faced bears, giant sloths, and beavers, hell pigs, you name it, and other things in the Ozarks prehistoric region that was also put in the cryptozoological archives, most of which that the NSA hasn't even released yet. So the secret space program, the benevolent faction, the arena of Solaris, primarily kept track of Earth events and human growth patterns and interlacing events affecting certain populaces and the whole populace of the Earth, really, like an Earth Defense Force. And it became like a agency that operated kind of like a space observed demographic archive. Soul catcher nets stem from the moon base, where our composites were created and cube kept and then deployed into various red systems. The North and South Pole are just wormholes that are like this, and they're riding the EM field channel, which sits adjacent and parallel to Earth's morphogenetic grid. And this looks like veins that are in congruence and in a flow side by side. And the Schumann cavity is the rest of the space outside of the inner Earth wormhole tube. And we have a tricuspid valve in us, but the inner Earth has four, two that point up to the poles and up to heaven, and then the upside down inversion wormhole tube that just points down and opens up into Hades and creates like a phantom zone matrix in and of itself, and the bars of iron and brass that go to the deep. And Sheol is a separate area where the roots of the tree of life and the tree of knowledge sit, and where souls are mediated, and where some sleep in the dust. So sidewise time is temporal timelines connected by cosmic strings. And the Bearden Alf waves, the scalar bubbles, why there are scalar bubbles that happen and just don't form and complete a cycle of scalar standing columnar waves is because the bubbles form and arc into phase space, generating atmospheric radar rings like ovals. And my experience with this was in Chippewa, Wisconsin, where I had a reddish oval of light hovering over my car for 3 days, following me everywhere. My boyfriend saw it, other people saw it. We'd go outside, it'd be there at 3 a.m., just hovering over my car. So scalar bubbles happen when you are off course, when you're traveling in your life path as you were not meant to do, getting sidetracked. And it's like a migraine discharge that can physically manifest in the aether, coming from signal core to get you back on track and repair you and clear your miasms and quantum schisms that are jammed up in the heavenlies, because everything originates in the heavenlies, and the warring in the heavens goes on daily. So our spirit does work way faster and farther ahead of our timeline and our track and our lifeline here than what we do in our physicality and even in our mentality. So our spirit goes and does work way farther ahead, and that even our consciousness can't even catch up to sometimes. So we're constantly realigning with the Most High and our Most High selves. And the last thought I'll leave you with is about Yahushua being the Word made flesh. Okay, he was the permutation of God from the Word spoken out of God's mouth. These permutations having preeminent light from the beginning of all created beings. So the Word itself, God was the Word. So the Word is part of his being and his beingness. The letters being themselves extensions of his being and the persona of the Godhead, like crowned attributes of Yahushua's. that Yahushua carried into this earth and grounded here. So he created an ark when he came here. And he carried with him light codes of language, and he was the Torah made flesh. The Word made flesh that stood uprightly before God. And that's his right standing, and that's our right standing when we activate the Word, and when we get filled with the Word, and when we get washed with the Word. Because it's alive. So when he gave up the ghost and the earthquake happened, which also happened at his birth, it's because his body was the embodiment of the Godhead and the literal curtain and veil between us and paradise back to our first estate. So he carried in his body the resonance of our first estate and our paradisical glory, because he's the hope of all glory, for those who had the scales come off their eyes and had eyes to see him and ears to hear him. So the word in him, as he was the curtain, was rent, and it shook the temple as his temple was being killed, and it destroyed the physical temple on earth and initiated us with him being the first fruits to be resurrected to become living temples for the new heaven and earth. So that bridged the gap and gave us access to enter into the Holy Holies, enter into the secret place with Elohim. And his blood was the door, the way, the truth, and the life. His blood and body was the propitiation for the rectification of the whole human race. And what a gift it is to be used in that process to become embodiments of the fulfillment of the living word. Where not one jot or tittle will be removed until all of creation that's groaning to be fulfilled will happen in the Messianic reign. So when you see world events, earthquakes, rumors of wars, the earth reeling to and fro, since we're even past the growing pains now, just remember the two biggest earthquakes on earth were his birth and his death, in the center of the earth, which is Jerusalem. So what do you have to fear if you're abiding in God and with God? Because those were the two biggest earthquakes that ever shook the earth. And so if you're in him, you're going to have that protection. So like I said, what an honor it is to become the embodiments of the fulfillment of the living word, the Spirit of God, which has the ability to pierce the very soul, to cut a soul and spirit in half. And we are just pieces of the nature of God, reflecting into each other, building that bridge to heaven and earth that Yahushua laid out in his foundational work and through the work that was done on the cross, which really was a galactic cross. So have a wonderful day, and God bless you all.